continue in section 5.4, talking about adding and subtracting polynomials. In our last video, we began this section, but we didn't ever actually get to the adding and subtracting. And so we talked about some terminology. We talked about what a polynomial is. We talked about monomials and binomials and trinomials. And then we also talked about finding the degree and even how to combine like terms. Okay, so in this video, we're going to get to the adding and subtracting. But before we do, I want us to talk about how to do each of these three examples. So what we're going to do is we're going to simplify each of these. We're going to give the degree. And then after we've simplified, we're going to tell if it's a monomial, binomial, or trinomial. And I feel like if you can get to this point, you're getting about ready to be able to add and subtract without a whole lot of issues, I hope. So on the first example, remember way back in chapter 1, we talked about simplifying, and we said that simplifying means distribute and combine like terms. Well, in this first example, we don't have any like terms, we don't have anything to distribute, and so there is no simplifying that has to be done. But we can tell the degree, and in this case the degree is, again, the highest exponent. Remember, we find that by finding the degree of each term, and then whichever term has the highest degree, that's the degree of the whole thing. So the first term here has a degree of 2. That is the degree of this whole polynomial. Now, when we find that degree, again, if there's only one variable, it's the highest exponent. And so each time we'll be aware of that. And then the question is this a monomial, binomial, or trinomial? And because there are 3 terms, you've got this term, and that term. You do have 3 terms. It is a trinomial. Now, in the next example, we need to simplify. And we can simplify because we have 1x cubed plus 4x cubed. So it's an understood coefficient of 1 out here. And so 1 of those plus 4 of those is going to be 5 of those x cubes. Now, we do need to name the degree. The degree in this case, again, is our highest exponent, which is 3. Because, again, there's only one variable. And then after we've simplified, is this 5x cubed a monomial, binomial, or trinomial? And it is a monomial. So there's all 3 parts of that one. And then on the next one, we again want to simplify. We can simplify here because x to the 8th and 2x to the 8th, they can go together. They're like terms. And so 1 of those plus 2 of those is 3x to the 8th. And then we have the negative x to the 7th. And that's all that can be simplified. We don't have anything that can be distributed, no more like terms. And so now it's simplified. So what is the degree? Hopefully you're saying that it's an 8. And then, is that after we've simplified a monomial, binomial, or trinomial? In this case, it is a binomial. Okay? And if you have any questions about that, shoot me an email, let me know, and I'll try to clear up any confusion that you might have. Now, as we continue to work with polynomials, one of the things we're going to have to do is evaluate polynomials. And the way we evaluate is to take a letter, put it in place of the variable, and figure out what that value is. And we've done this since our very first section, very first chapter. We talked about how to take a number, substitute it in, and find the value. What's different here is that now we have exponents that are more than just a 1 or even a 2. Now we're going to have exponents of 3 and could have other exponents as well. And we're putting in negative numbers potentially, and so that is also going to impact our work a little bit. So on the first one, it says find the value for t equals -3. Meaning that if we take this trinomial, 4t cubed minus t squared minus t, and we put negative 3 in, we want to know that value. So I'm going to rewrite it and substitute in the t over here to the side. So we're going to have 4 times negative 3 cubed minus negative 3 squared minus negative 3. Now, a couple of things. I have put this in parentheses because I need you to understand that we took the t out, so t comes out completely, negative 3 goes in its place. I see people sometimes, and I've even seen this with some of you, where you end up putting the negative 3 in, but you try to keep the t in. Well, our directions tell us that t is negative 3. And so if we put negative 3 in, t's coming out. Okay? And so what I want you to realize is that this still is 4t cubed minus t squared minus t, but in place of t, we've put the negative 3. So it's in parentheses, and hopefully that helps you see it. I've also put the parentheses because if you take that negative 3 and raise it to the third power or the second power, or even to the first power potentially, that negative being in parentheses versus not is really, really important. Excuse me. So, as we simplify this negative 3 cubed, remember that's negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3, which ends up being negative 27. And then it's minus negative 3 squared. Well, negative 3 times negative 3 is a positive 9. And then that last minus a negative, it does become positive, so we'll go ahead and change that to plus 3. Now, I've kept the negative 27 and the 9 both in parentheses, and I'll typically do that until I use that number, okay? And so I squared the negative 3, I cubed the negative 3, and now we're going to actually use that number. So 4 times negative 27, remember you're not using a calculator, so if you need to take that out to the side and take the 27 and multiply not divide, so 27 times 4, and if you need to multiply that by hand, by all means go for it. So 4 times 7 is 28, carry your 2, you get 8 and 10, so it's 108. And so this is a negative 108 minus 9 plus 3. And so continue to simplify that. Negative 108 minus 9 is negative 117. Negative 117 plus 3 is negative 114. Again, don't hesitate to write this out to the side if you need to. If you need to do this multiplication to the side, by all means, go do that. Okay? Now, on the next one, we're taking negative 1 and substituting it in. One thing I'll say about the one we just did before I move on, because we're squaring negative 3 times negative 3 gives us a positive 9. When you cube that negative, you get a negative. So negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3 does give you negative 27. So be careful with your signs here. That can really be something that can mess you up if you happen to miss a sign somewhere. Now, look at the next one. We're going to take negative 1 and substitute it in. And so we have 2 times negative 1 cubed plus 8 times negative 1 minus 6. And again, hopefully you see that all we did was take the y out, put negative 1 in its place. So, again, following order of operations, negative 1 cubed is negative 1. And then 8 times negative 1 is a negative 8, and then minus 6. Now, 2 times negative 1 is negative 2, minus 8 minus 6. And negative 2 minus 8 is negative 10. Negative 10 minus 6 is negative 16. And so there is our final answer. Now, again, if you have questions about any of that, feel free to let me know. We're now ready to look at how to add and subtract. So to add polynomials, all you do is combine like terms. That's it. That's all you're going to do is simply combine like terms. So when you look at these two polynomials, we do have a trinomial plus another trinomial, but there's nothing to distribute. There's nothing to do from that standpoint to get rid of the parentheses. You could take the parentheses off and it doesn't change anything. There's no need to rewrite it though, so we're just going to combine like terms. So 4x cubed plus 6x cubed, again adding their coefficients, you're going to get 10x cubed. And then we're going to add our x squared terms together, so negative 3x squared plus 2x squared. Negative 3 plus 2 is a negative 1x squared. The 1's not required. And then we have our x terms, and then we only have the 1x term, so the 2x is just going to come down. And then our last term is our constant. It's the one at the end here. And so once we get all those combined, we now have our final answer. Now, I would encourage you to mark these like I've marked them, because I do that so I make sure I use everything. It also helps me to see, okay, these terms go together versus these terms go together, and so on. Okay, so I would encourage you to do that. Now, do the next one on your own. Pause the video, do it. I'll do it in just a second. So hopefully you've stopped the video, you've worked this one out. And again, it's just adding, and so you're just combining like terms. And when you do, x squared and 4x squared go together, you get 5x squared. And then our x term is the negative 2x. And then our constant term, the 5 and the negative 2 go together, which is positive 3. Now, notice that on both of these, we've written this in descending order. If you happen to have the right terms, but you don't put them in descending order, your math lab is going to count that off. So make sure you do put those in the right order. Again, if you have any questions about that, let me know. So on the next one, we are subtracting. And the only difference between addition and subtraction is literally that you just subtract. So what we're going to do is we need to understand that this first polynomial minus the second polynomial, this negative sign is applied to every one of these terms. And so I'm going to encourage you to distribute that negative. And that way you get all the right signs. And then once you have the right signs, you just combine like terms again. And so I'm going to rewrite this. The 14y cubed minus 6y squared plus 2y minus 5. That polynomial stays the way it is. Just bring it down without parentheses, because there's nothing to distribute into that. But that negative does get distributed. So when you distribute it, you'll have negative 2y cubed plus 7y squared plus 4y minus 6. And so we're going to combine like terms. And so we have 14y cubed and negative 2y cubed that goes together. So 14 minus 2 is going to be 12y cubed. And then we go to the y squared term. So we have negative 6 of those plus 7 of those, which is a positive y squared. And then we have the y term. So 2y plus 4y is 6y. And then we have our constant terms. Negative 5 minus 6 is negative 11. And there is our final answer. That is the simplified form. Now, I'd encourage you again to stop the video, pause it, work the next one on your own. So hopefully you did pause the video, you worked that one on your own. Again, we're just subtracting here, and so we're going to take this negative and distribute. That way we make sure we get all the right signs. If you don't distribute the negative, you're going to miss the signs on your last terms, and so you do want to make sure you do get that distributed. So again, I'm going to rewrite it as x squared plus x minus 3x squared minus 2x plus 1. Again, when we distribute the negative, the signs on the last trinomial just change. And so we'll combine like terms. So x squared and negative 3x squared is negative 2x squared. And then our x term goes together. So x minus 2x is a negative x. And then our constant term is the last term, that is positive 1. Again, if you have questions about the subtraction, let me know. And so our last couple here, this first one has addition and subtraction, both. And notice our directions say add or subtract, so could be either one. In this case, though, we've got subtraction and addition. So in this negative needs to get distributed to this set of parentheses. It does not apply to the last set of parentheses. It only applies to that second set. And again, if you don't distribute the negative, you're going to miss a sign. It's going to mess you up. You need to make sure you get that distributed. So what I'm going to encourage you to do is rewrite the whole thing, but make sure you distribute that negative. So I'm going to do that here. And the 6p to the fourth minus 8p cubed plus 2p minus 1, that polynomial just stays the way it is. Then we'll distribute the negative, and so we'll get negative 7p to the fourth minus 6p squared plus 12. And then that last polynomial is fine the way it is also, so it's a positive p to the fourth minus 3p plus 8. And so now we need to combine all of our like terms. And so if you look at the p to the fourth terms, you've got 6p to the fourth, a negative 7p to the fourth, and a p to the fourth. Well, 6p to the fourth minus 7p to the fourth is a negative 1p to the fourth. But that negative 1 plus 1p to the fourth is just 0. And so there's no point in putting 0p to the fourth, it's just 0. And so that cancels out. So then we can go to our p cubed term. We have negative 8p cubed, and that's the only p cubed term we have. So let's bring it down. Now, you'll notice that the next term, if you go left to right, is that 2p. But we want to keep our terms in descending order of our exponents. So we're going to go to the p squared term next, which is that term. And that's the only one there is, so it's negative 6p squared. Then we can do our p terms. So there's a 2p and a negative 3p. So they go together. Be negative 1p. And then our last term is our constant. So we have negative 1 plus 12, which is 11. 11 plus 8 is 19. And now again, you can go back now that we've marked everything, and you can see everything got used. And so there must be our final answer. And hopefully, again, that's not a huge problem for you. Again, pause the video, try the next one on your own. And hopefully you did that. And so if you did pause the video, you should have this answer. We will, again, distribute this negative. And we'll distribute that to all three terms. And again, we're going to rewrite it just so all we got to do is combine like terms. So that trinomial stays the way it is. Nothing's changed about it. And then we will distribute the negative. And so we're going to have a negative 2p squared q squared plus p squared plus 3q. And so now we can again combine like terms. So this 5p squared q squared and 2p squared q squared, they are like terms because they have the same variables with the same exponents. And so 5 minus 2 is going to be 3p squared q squared. And then our p squared terms can go together. So negative 4 of those plus 1 of those is negative 3 p squared. And then our q terms go together. 2q plus 3q is going to be 6q.